For me, travel is about understanding and appreciating the great diversity of the world around us, and it's about meeting people. And I think someone like Jimmy Nelson sort of really encapsulates that, his passion, his compassion, and his sense of sort of fun and laughter. His connection with people, I think, really comes out, and that's one of the reasons why we want to work with him. Also, it's great that he goes to some far-flung places, destinations that we love and we want to go to ourselves, and so do our clients. So we're delighted to have this talk, and not just because he's an amazing photographer or captivating storyteller, but for us he embodies much of what travel should be about, namely expertise, empathy, and above all, a sense of fun and sort of quirkiness, which we very much relate to. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. We're in for a real treat, and thus, on behalf of Steps Travel, it's a huge honour and great pleasure to introduce Jimmy Nelson.
What inspired the making of my book before they passed away? Well, it's a very, very long answer, but I'll try and focus it down. It's a lifelong journey. It's still, as with all journeys, it's still happening. It's the beginning of 4 years up until now. This is the completion of the first part. Included are 35 tribes and cultures, chosen from their aesthetic vulnerability and isolation and the nature within which they live. This picture was the epitome of what I wanted to make, the epitome of the photography I've been trying to make since my childhood. Very romantic, very iconographic, the landscape, the aesthetic, the composition is very important. The horses, the man, the nature, the light, the cold, but it's very, very difficult to do. This is going to disappear. It's going to disappear very, 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 very quickly. But it's very important it doesn't disappear because this is where we originated from. This individuality and this ethnicity is an inspiration to us in our future, and we have to readdress that balance. In the developed world, if we lose that individuality, that authenticity, which I regard as individual, we will become lesser people, because that gives us the objectivity of who we are and where we've come from and where we should go to. An authenticity of humanity that I believe, and this is maybe a little bit evangelical, so forgive me, that we've lost. And we're going to lose very, very quickly, because through the digitalization of the world, all these places are rapidly changing. And in many of these pictures, people had smartphones, and they're beginning to see what's happening to the rest of the world. And so they're going to make two choices, and these two choices are 100% inevitable. They're either going to choose to homogenize and put on a grey t-shirt and move to the city, or they're going to be pushed off, because 85% of the indigenous cultures, lands in the world are full of mines and minerals, which we want and we're going to pull out of the ground. So either A or B, they're going to leave, and by leaving, they're going to abandon something which is very, very, very important to us, because this is how we originated. I believe that as human beings, if we're to evolve in a good way and in a balanced way, we need to learn from them, and they also need to learn from us. Forgive me, it's not that they have to we have to put them in a glass cage and keep them sort of romanticized ideals, but we do have to start a discussion with them and with ourselves. Who are you? What do you represent? How do you live? Are you aware of how special you are? Are you aware of how beautiful you are? In many ways, dare I say it, are you aware of how wealthy you are? We believe we have a wealth, but it's a very, very different wealth than what these people do. And I also believe that we're beginning to understand what we've lost, and we can learn in one way or another from them. The first and the most important aspect was the relationship that we had to develop with one another. Once that was developed, I put them on a pedestal and I essentially worshipped them and said, you're amazing, you're beautiful, you're fantastic. We owe it to these people to glorify them, to iconize them. It is subjective, it is romantic, but it's as we regard ourselves. Justin was talking about a few minutes ago, it's where you're now going to be going traveling, and I must admit it probably is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. The Altai Mountains in northwestern Mongolia. And living there are the Kazakhs. Very proud people. They're like Hollywood heroes for me. And this is all real. And they have these fantastic eagles. In some cases, they have 5-meter wingspans, which they get given when they're teenagers. And they train the eagle, and that eagle lives with them the whole of their life. So they go off hunting over the mountains for foxes and rabbits, and the eagles travel on their arm. And when they see a fox, they take the hat off the eagle, and the eagle flies off down the valley and grabs the fox. And the only person who's allowed to retrieve that fox is the owner of the eagle. So no matter however many other Kazakhs go to the eagle will remain holding onto the fox until its own owner comes. So it's a beautiful bond. It's a beautiful bond between man and nature and environment. Went for my camera. In the front of the camera, the lenses are all based on a plate. And I was about to change the lens, and my fingers went and stuck to the plate. So I pulled them off and I ripped them, and I left all the skin behind. And I stood there shocked, and I saw my fingers bleeding, and then I thought, and then they started freezing because of the wind. I had no gloves on, and then I couldn't function. So I started to cry. Until one of the men gestured like this behind me. I turned around, and there were a couple of women, and they beckoned me over, and they're these big Mongolian women. They've got beautiful faces, and they're very warm, and I sort of flailed over in all my tears. And she opened the jacket, grabbed my hands, and put them on her breasts. Not directly on her breasts, but on in Dutch is oksels, armpits. And the other woman opened the jacket, and they started cuddling me, and they rocked me from side to side, like a baby, as I was. And started humming a tune into my ears, not that I can remember what tune it was, but essentially trying to help me, trying to bring the warmth back into my hands. And I let go. My legs sort of buckled, and I sort of hung between them. A number of minutes later, some semblance of feeling came back, and I turned around, and the men were still standing there. And you can imagine the wind is blowing, and they're still standing there, and they've got these sort of 30-kilo eagles on their arms, and they're still standing, going, "What are we doing here?" And my fingers are sort of vaguely beginning to function again. And then I make a picture. I made the picture, they nodded, I nodded, and we all started walking down the mountain. I thought, Jesus, something very odd has just happened. This is an Islamic culture. Now, it's not fundamentalist, but it is an Islamic culture. It's a very, very strong, very deep, very traditional group of people. And for one reason or another, they had broken down all their cultural values to help me. And as human beings, we connected. The camera doesn't interest me. The camera is, in many ways, I've gone back in time. So I'm so dissociated with technology. I'm so far removed from technology, because the more removed from technology, the fewer buttons, the more basic it becomes, the more time I have to interact with the people I'm taking pictures of. And he said, well, it's going to cost you this amount. I said, well, that's a lot of money. So when do I get them, and how many Eskimos do I manage to photograph, and when can I go back? And he said, well, it's I don't know, and I don't know, and I don't know. I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? You're asking me to pay a fortune, disappear with you across the ice and the tundra, and you don't have any answers to these questions. He said, well, no, I don't, because we're about, if you'd like to with me, go into an area larger than the size of France, and we're going to look for 90 people. 80% of what you see in the book is what they wore on a daily basis. 20% is their Sunday best. I didn't put it on them. I went to them and I said, I'm here in a discussion. Many of them didn't know what photography was, but show me to yourself at your most proud. Show me to yourself at your most beautiful. And for that, they gave me their time and their patience, and to be honest, their vanity. It's all about vanity. They start feeling special. They start feeling, it sounds tacky, the attention is given to them. And then I start, wait, don't move like this. And the more I whisper, the quieter it gets, the more people get into a focus. Then I start putting this camera together and trying not to freeze to it or break it or vomit on it, depending on what state of physical distress I'm in at the time. And I put it on this thing. In the meantime, the guy's sitting there and I'm going, shh, and he's getting stiller and stiller and stiller. And everybody around you is getting stiller, until eventually you get almost into a trance. Then you put in the plate, and then you start looking at his eyes when they do and they don't flick. And you go, shh. And then you press the shutter, and it's a very, very slow shutter. And then you've made a link, and then you go, oh, yeah. And then you run up and you give him a big hug. And you go, oh, lovely picture. And he goes, I did well. And then you find a relation. And then somebody else comes and he goes, if you stand up, you're like, oh, I want my picture taken. And they go like this. And then before you know it, the whole village is fighting to get on and off that chair. And then the next day, the next village arrives, and then you can't leave because the whole valley wants their picture taken, because they all want to sit on the chair and get you to touch them and to raise their chin and tell them that they're beautiful. Once that process was completed and that contact was made, it's not about a picture. The pictures are a catalyst. Every photograph has always only ever been that, and the picture is a catalyst for the viewer to interpret it as they want. But by making the pictures as I have made them very beautiful, very romantic, very aesthetic, very, very, very deliberate, I'm hoping for a particular catalyst to happen, that people become curious and reinvigorated and reinterested in a subject matter which people tend not to be interested in, and then ask why they're interested. Who are these people? What is it? It's something we should know more about. One of the most exciting journeys, and there were 16 journeys in the whole project, was Papua New Guinea. Exciting because it is some of the most remarkably remote place still left on the planet. 1,000 of the world's 7,000 official languages are in Papua New Guinea. It's extraordinarily diverse. Every valley has a different culture and ethnicity in it. But it's on the edge. It's on the edge of anarchy. It's on the edge of anarchy, not in a negative point of view, but in a natural point of view, physical and within the nature. And creatively, it's extraordinary. Everybody decorates themselves in the wildest ways, and that is out of control. So it's sort of beyond the senses of what we're used to. I've made a record, but a record of which I'm going to give back. So I feel I've done half of the processes I've taken, I've illustrated, I've recorded, I'm trying to show and share. Now I want to give it back. I want to go back and show them what I did and get in a discussion with them. Who are you? Who are we? This is how I see you. Is this how you see yourself? And are you aware of how significant you are? And are you aware of the value and how rich you are that goes far beyond a materialism which you're rapidly evolving into?